Hello. So as part of the JavaScript project for the Flatiron curriculum, I've created a single page application or a SPA, and it's a resume type page. So as I start my job search, I can use this as a focal point, use it on my social media, just give people a brief overview about who I am and what my work history has consisted of. So this is the start of the page, just right at the top. I have a simple graphic showing a little bit about me. And then as we scroll down, there is an about section, has my picture, and it gives an overview of my work history and skills. And then if we keep scrolling down, I have a few of my previous jobs listed, as well as descriptions of them and the titles. And if we keep scrolling down, there's the option to connect and link to my various social media. Back at the top of the page, so all of these are rendered. I used the Rails API with the SQLite, and so these are all rendered from the database. As far as my about section and my work history, those are rendered from the database using JavaScript, rendered as JSON and then using JavaScript. So I can log in and edit these items from the main page instead of having to go into the database and load them. If I click on just anywhere in this component here, it's going to load a custom form. So I can change the image, I can change any of the text, and then if I decide I didn't want to update it, I just click outside of the box and the form goes away. And then as well as on any of the other work components, I can edit those images, titles, text. And you'll notice on my work history, there is a title, so I wanted to include that on the form. But on the about section, I didn't need the title, so that was not included on the form. But I can go through and click on either of these, any of these work history. I can just change this one to AP real quick, just so we can see that edit. So yeah, it just comes through as AP and marketing. And then I can log out. And then these are no longer clickable or editable. So if we go to the backend, starting at the index HTML page, it's just pretty much a regular blank page. There are different containers, and then my JavaScript loads that information inside the container. And I have my login form, just depending on if you click on that or click out of it, it appears or doesn't appear. I think we can go, let's see. And then I have a few different CSS styling sheets. If we look at, we'll just start at the front end. If we look at the index.js JavaScript file, it's going to load a new instance of my app. So then we'll go over to my app file. And from here, it's going to set a constructor of this trades as a new instance of the trades class. And we're also going to load up a new sessions adapter. Once that new sessions adapter initially loads, we'll look at it in a second, but that's just checking to see if I'm currently logged in or not, to know whenever each time the page loads. So from here, we'll go to our trades, and that is going to set up a constructor with the empty array of this for this trades. And we're also going to set up an adapter, which is going to load my adapter, which is going to do all the talking back and forth to my database in the Rails app. And then we'll also call the fetch and load trades method, which is going to make that call to the trades adapter, get that initial load of all of the trades from my database, and then render them on the page. So for each trade that comes through, it's loading, it's calling an instance of my trade class, and I have all of my constructors set up, all of my event listeners and variables that I'll need to use throughout this page for each trade. And then it's going to call the render trade, and render trade is what's actually telling the browser how to load the information on the page. So if the trade type is about, it knows that it's going to load that right here. And then if the trade type is work, that's going to load down here on my columns. I don't give it the capability to add or delete work history. I would rather just edit it. And so I can just keep that information and the looks of things just kind of concise on the page. So whenever it renders a trade, once it decides or sees that if it's an about or a work item, it's also going to see if I'm logged in or not. If I am, then it will give me the added functionality to render that trade, the edit trade, which is going to set up my form, and whenever you click on each element, it will allow that form window to pop up. And that's kind of set up similar to just the initial load, just depending on if it's work or not, work or about. Okay, so then when we look at our trades adapter, so we're doing that initial fetch to the database. We'll return all the database information as JSON, and then we can look back on the Rails side to see what that looks like. So that's going to go to my index method. It's going to pull all of the trades and then render them all, except for the created at and updated at timestamps. I didn't think that I needed that information necessarily. And then we'll go back. Whenever I make a patch request to save an edit from a form, it's going to pull in that form information and send that over to the database by the ID, and then it will return that and render it to the page. So if we look at my edit method, my update rather, it's going to find that trade by ID and then update it and render a message whether or not it did or did not successfully update it. And I think that's, so yeah. So that's everything in the trades for session. So whenever it does its initial load on that, once everything's loaded and it calls the app, it's going to check down here to see if the session, if I'm still logged in or not. And if I am logged in, it's going to show that text that shows that I'm logged in. If not, it just changes everything back to where it's kind of a little bit more secret. When I do send the fetch request to log in, that's going to go via post method, and it sends the credentials. Those credentials are sent to Rails, which then verifies them with the database. So will find me by the email address and verify that that password's correct, and then either allow me to log in or not. And then whenever it's time to log out, we'll end our session. It'll trigger the delete method, which is going to go to the destroy method in my sessions controller, and it'll clear that session. And then as far as the route setup, so yeah, we have the GET request, the patch request, post request, and then delete. And yeah, I think that is pretty much everything. It's pretty simple, but it still hits all the marks that I needed to hit. And it was a lot of fun to make. And I look forward to working on this a little bit more and making it a little bit more in depth as well. So thank you for watching.